From a one-room dirt floor cabin with no windows to a 35-room mansion on a Hudson River estate to a hospital in Hawaii that half the country once refused to believe, this is how every U.S. president entered the world. And spoiler, while some were born into power and privilege, others arrived during a funeral procession. Literally. But before we get there, let's start where America itself started, Virginia. 8 of the first 12 presidents were born in Virginia, which is wild when you think about it. The state basically had a factory running for future presidents. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, all Virginia boys. Virginia is nicknamed the Mother of Presidents for a reason. But here's the thing. Most of these founding fathers weren't born into grand plantations. They were born into a world where America didn't even exist yet. 8 of the first 9 presidents were born as British subjects in colonies that technically belonged to the king. Let that sink in. The men who would build the United States of America were at birth citizens of Great Britain. Now, our first president, George Washington, was born on February 22, 1732, on a tobacco plantation in Virginia. Nothing too dramatic there. But John Adams, our second president, has a fun birth fact. Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, the second and sixth presidents, were born in adjacent houses just 75 feet apart in Braintree, Massachusetts. Father and son, next-door neighbors at birth, both became president. What are the odds? But if you think that's a coincidence, hold on. Because our 7th president has the most insane birth story of anyone on this list. Andrew Jackson's father died in late February 1767. His mother, Betty, then traveled to the Old Waxhaw Presbyterian Church to bury her husband, and on the return trip she gave birth to Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States. The man was literally born on the way back from his own father's funeral. But here's where it gets even stranger. The Waxhaw's wilderness was so remote that the precise border between North and South Carolina had yet to be surveyed. So nobody, not even Jackson himself, knew exactly which state he was born in. Both North and South Carolina still claim him to this day, born during a funeral in a state that doesn't technically exist yet. Old Hickory really did come into this world the hard way. And speaking of hard, Martin Van Buren, born in 1782, was the first president born as an actual American citizen and not a British subject. Finally, after 8 presidents born under the crown, Van Buren was the first true red, white, and blue American baby from day one. Now the early presidents were a mixed bag of wealth and poverty. But somewhere around the 1800s, a new presidential birth trend emerged, the log cabin. And this is where things get interesting. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 in a simple log cabin in Kentucky, the son of a carpenter and farmer. One room, dirt floor, no window. Lincoln was so embarrassed by his poverty-stricken origins that he said his lineage was best summed up in the phrase, "the short and simple annals of the poor." And yet this is the same man whose face ended up on the penny and the $5 bill. Not bad for a log cabin kid, but Lincoln wasn't alone. James Garfield was born in 1831 in a log cabin in Ohio, growing up poverty-stricken and fatherless, making him the last of the log cabin presidents. From Jackson to Garfield, being born in a log cabin basically became a presidential requirement. After William Henry Harrison was swept into office in 1840 as the log cabin candidate, it was said that a man could hardly hope for the White House unless he'd first been close to a log cabin. Poverty was the ultimate campaign ad, but not every president started at the bottom. Some entered this world with silver spoons firmly in place. Franklin D. Roosevelt was born in 1882 at his family's 35-room Hyde Park estate in New York. Theodore Roosevelt, his distant cousin, was born into a wealthy New York family in 1858. And John F. Kennedy, born in 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, into one of the richest and most politically connected families in the country. Different worlds entirely from Jackson being born roadside during a funeral. And then came the birth that broke the mold completely. Jimmy Carter was the first president born in a hospital in Plains, Georgia in 1924. Up until then, every single American president had been born at home, in cabins, on plantations, in farmhouses, in family bedrooms. Carter's hospital birth marked the moment history quietly shifted. Bill Clinton and every president born during and after World War II followed, all born in hospitals, not private residences. Clinton himself was born in 1946 in Hope, Arkansas, and yes, that's the actual name of the town, Hope, Arkansas. You genuinely couldn't make that up for a future president. The hospital where he was born no longer exists. It was torn down, and a funeral home now stands on the site, with a flagpole and marker commemorating his birth. From the Hope Maternity Ward to the Oval Office, with a funeral home marking the spot. That's either poetry or a very dark joke. Now, only 8 presidents were born west of the Mississippi River, which tells you everything about how the early presidency was essentially an East Coast club. But one birth changed that forever. Barack Obama was born in 1961 in Honolulu, Hawaii, the president born farthest west of any in American history. And of course, his birth became the most publicly scrutinized birth of any president ever, with years of conspiracy theories demanding proof of something every other president had simply been taken at their word for. Meanwhile, George W. Bush was born in Connecticut, not Texas, which surprises almost everyone. And his father, George H.W. Bush, born in Massachusetts. The 2 Texas-born presidents are actually Dwight D. Eisenhower and Lyndon B. Johnson, 2 guys we don't typically picture as Texas babies. And then there's Donald Trump, born in 1946 in Queens, New York. No president has ever been born in New York City, Los Angeles, or Chicago until Trump, the biggest city in America, finally producing a president after 240 years.